Boggs. I'm the VP of Business Agility at SLOconf.
And I'm Ryan. I am the SVP of Consulting for Continuo, and we specialize on cloud and DevOps consulting.
Let's just jump in, Ryan. You only have 10 minutes. What does DevOps mean, actually?
Been in the industry for a little over 20 years. And when I came in, the way software got created is you talked about requirements and design. You do some testing, or you do some development. You do some more testing. You find out things didn't work, so you do a little more development, a little more testing. You get a bunch of people to sign off on things. And then ultimately you release it to production. And then hopefully somebody uses the code that you wrote. We actually found out later that a lot of the code we wrote never really got used. So when I talk about DevOps, it's literally anything I can do technically or procedurally to take that timeline from I have an idea to seeing how people are using that idea in the form of code and compressing it.
You just stole my definition of what Agile means.
Well, then I'll put you in a tough spot. What does Agile mean to you, Melissa?
Similarly, like it's all about being able to listen closely to your customer and then move quickly. You know, and when I say customer, it's the global customer, if you will, the overall customer. But anything that you can do to bring people in closer inside of your organization to make things not only just move more quickly, because often we get, oh, you're going to be faster. Mm-hmm. It's actually more about delivering value faster and more smoothly within the organization. And so it is funny. I hear a lot of people ask the question, like, are you doing DevOps or are you doing Agile? And I'm like, I'm sorry, like they're basically the same thing. At best, they're cousins or siblings.
I think they are. And what's interesting is, like, at least when I talk about DevOps and when I'm talking to technical people, a lot of times the conversation naturally gravitates towards things like writing pipelines or infrastructure configuration as code, containers, things like that. And, you know, yeah, that's true. In the world of DevOps, we spend a lot of time building those things and refining those things and leaning on modern technology to make those things more resilient and more secure. But at the end of the day, those are commodities that are in service to releasing faster, measuring what we're releasing, and making better informed decisions on what's a good pursuit versus something that seemed really good in the boardroom, but then when we went and deployed it to market, didn't quite land the way we wanted it to. So yeah, I look at those things as commodities that we just leverage in the world of DevOps. And I imagine there's some parallels that you're seeing in the Agile world and in the business agility world.
Well, sure, because you say commodities and I would agree and then add, I mean, they're tools, and like tools all the way back to ancient man, the tools are only as good as, you know, how you use them as people and as humans. And, you know, how we are looking at how we approach things. So it actually brings me to another topic that kind of lands, I think, right here in the middle of both of us, which is, how do you know if you're using it well? You know, how do you know if you're using those tools well? How do you know if your customers are excited about what you're doing? How do you get there?
It's really just around metric capture. And it's not only the actual data, the ones and zeros that you can pull out of the systems and process, but it's what you do with that information. We live in a very, data-rich society right now, where instrumentation and telemetry is in the forefront. If you look at some of the most valuable companies that have come out of either Silicon Valley or just the startup movement that have now become enterprise-wide tooling, you're seeing more and more focus on data and metrics and synthesizing those and leading on things like AI and ML to really suss them out a little bit better. And at the end of the day, we're usually trying to answer one of like 2 or 3 meta questions. What are my customers using? How much is it costing me to get things that are usable to my customer? And what should I do next? In my mind, those are the 3 main questions that most companies or teams are seeking answers for. So a lot of the patterns that we're seeing, a lot of the learnings that we're getting are in service to those. And that's why I call tools oftentimes commodities, like you pointed out, but they're typically in service to answering those types of questions. And I'm curious if what I'm saying is completely off rhythm with what you're seeing from the other side of the lens, or if, again, just like our definitions of our umbrellas are aligned.
We're definitely aligned. What I've seen as a backlash to how some of those metrics have been used in the past is there's an allergy sometimes to metrics because they have been weaponized in the past. And I think what you're saying, and what I have told a lot of the organizations I've worked with, is you have to be careful to be looking at those metrics as a measure of the system, not of the individual, as a human being or like as a performance metric. I'm one of those people that believes that people wake up in the morning and they want to do the best they can. And so, yes, it can show you things about what's going on in your organization, but the question shouldn't be, why are you being so lazy? It should be, what's getting in your way? What can we remove? Even in my own organization right now, we're having a lot of conversations about system metrics, and, it can be tempting for teams to game them or like try to make them look good. And I discourage that because we actually want to see what's real. You and I were talking earlier about, and I'll ask you to talk about it in a second, but the mirror, you want to see the mirror. Like, you want to see what's going on as a leader or as an individual so that you can make things better.
Typically, when I start with new teams I'm working with, or when my teams start working with new clients, one of the first things that we like to do is dive into a value stream map. And assuming there's one person that doesn't know what a value stream map is, it's basically all of the processes and sub-processes that go from concept to cash, and you wrap it in value-added activities, and you counter that with time-wasting activities, right? So we like starting there because it sort of shows that full mirror. If I want to the most basic code commit I can do is just add a comment to a code base and push that comment to production. And that's like the tracer bullet through an organization. How long would it take for me to add that comment? And I track that in a value stream map. It tells me what, when I take an action, what the next action is, how long it sits in the queue before the next thing happens, and so on and so forth. That then creates the mirror for the organization. We didn't talk about this before, but there's probably a metaphor between mirrors and windows. And too many times people, I'm one of those crusty managers now, so I can say this as a member of the society. Managers oftentimes look at a mirror as if it's a window, and I'm looking in on my team to see how good or bad they're doing inside the constraints of the system. But it's still a mirror. I'm part of that system as a manager. I'm part of that system as a leader. So we're all like, there's the chickens and pig metaphor that I guess I'm tiptoeing around right now. But even the management, even the leaders are responsible for the health of the system. So you don't condemn teams for behaving badly. You ask yourself, how can we improve the system so that the teams are nurtured enough to move faster? Now, baselining this all back to metrics. Metrics empower me as a manager to understand where those choke points are and where those acceleration areas are. And also, ultimately where we're extracting business value from the market based off those decisions. So really that's sort of the mirror metaphor that we were talking about before. You can't get angry at the mirror because, you're bald and you probably put on 15 pounds over the pandemic. You can only get mad at the system and yourself for allowing that to happen and ask, well, I can't grow any more hair on this part. Down here, we're going good. But I can make choices to figure out how can I live as a better person and make the mirror reflect the person I want to be. And the same is true within the context of teams and delivery. I think that's sort of what you were talking about, am I right?
Yeah, I think when you look at them from that perspective, they become very powerful, and it actually empowers the teams. The teams become powerful in their ability to get what they need to serve the customer. With that, we are at the end of our time. This has been so fun. Thank you for joining me and sort of walking into the bar, Agile and DevOps together, and having this conversation.
No worries. Thanks for having me.